Hi everyone, Hauke here with a bit of a techie topic. You see, my off-the-shelf NAS recently died on me, and when I wasn't all that impressed with the customer service I received, I decided to build my very own DIY storage solution from scratch. So that is what we're going to do today. We have quite a bit of ground to cover, so I'll break the whole thing into several videos, and each part into chapters with timestamps that I'll put in the description below. So if you'd like to skip ahead or jump around, have at it. In this video, we'll talk about the basics, what happened, what concepts are at play, and what I am planning to do. In the second part, we'll put together the hardware, and in part 3, we will pick, install, and configure the software. And maybe I'll add a fourth part later where I'll go into more details surrounding some of the more advanced aspects of the configuration. Before we go any further though, some of you are going to think, wow, he's very tech savvy, while others will see me as a complete amateur hack. And guess what? Depending on your own level of expertise, you're both correct. While I am an engineer and I have dabbled with the innards of computers in the past, I am by no means, nor do I claim to be, an expert when it comes to storage, Open Media Vault, Linux, or anything else that follows. I had a lot of help along the way, and I am merely sharing what worked for me. So with that out of the way, let's start with some basics. What is a NAS and why would you want one? When you save any data, your computer stores it on a device called a hard disk drive, or if you have a more modern computer, on a solid state drive. They essentially do the same thing, but instead of motors spinning mechanical platters, SSDs are based on memory chips and digital flash technology like a USB stick. They are quiet, faster, and use less power. They are, however, more expensive for the same capacity and tend to have a shorter lifespan. Think of it kind of like a difference between a CD player and an iPod. So hard disks are great for storing data, especially if you have a lot to store, while SSDs are your preferred choice when you need fast and frequent access, like your operating system does. In fact, if your PC or laptop still uses a mechanical hard disk as its main drive, moving to an SSD is a very effective way to speed that old clunker up quite a bit and make it feel so much more snappy. If the drives are installed inside your computer, we refer to them as internal, as opposed to the external drives that tend to be connected temporarily, often via a USB cable. A network-attached storage is, as the name implies, a storage device, usually consisting of multiple individual hard drives inside, that is connected to your computer not directly, but rather via the network. If it is connected to your home network, we call it a NAS. If it is somewhere else entirely and you access it through the internet, it becomes this thing we call the cloud. The device itself is just a simple computer with several disks and some specialized software on it. That's basically it. So why would you want to own one? Well, if you need to store a lot of data, games or video files for example, your computer is likely going to run out of internal storage rather quickly as it has limited space, both physically and in terms of ports to connect drives to. And there usually isn't a simple way to configure RAID either. External drives are an option, but you still have to store those somewhere and then go get them and plug them in when you need a particular piece of data. Plus they tend to be somewhat capacity constrained as they're primarily meant to be mobile. A NAS, on the other hand, can be a vast pool of storage that is instantly accessible, even via the internet if you configure it that way. It can also become your media server and run transcoding software such as Plex, which optimizes media for all your devices on the network in real time. But for that, your hardware really needs to be up to the task. I have used this 12 terabyte Western Digital MyCloud Mirror for a little over 4 years. At its core, it consists of two 6 terabyte hard drives, a 1.3 gigahertz ARM Cortex-A9 dual-core processor, and 512 megabyte of RAM. Not a whole lot of power, but it did the trick for me as a file server. And because I had the drive set up in RAID 1, it had about 6 terabyte of redundant actual storage space available.
Wait, what is RAID?
In case I've lost you already, RAID stands for Redundant Array of Inexpensive or Independent Disks. It is a way to set up several physical drives in a computer to act as one or more logical unit for data redundancy, improved performance, or both. Different RAID levels denote how that array is configured. Level 0, aka striping for example, greatly increases the speed as portions of the data are simultaneously read from or written to multiple drives. This, however, increases the risk of data loss quite a bit, as a single failing disk will cause the complete loss of all data on all drives as they're tied together as a single unit. Mirroring, or level 1 RAID on the other hand, does something completely different. It creates redundancy by copying the data to multiple drives simultaneously, which effectively cuts the capacity in half and doesn't give you any speed advantages. Now, this sounds safer than RAID 0, and it is, but let me make sure you hear one message loud and clear. RAID is not backup, okay? Trust me, it's not. Don't even go there. No matter how much redundancy you put in there, backup it ain't, okay? Now, there are plenty of other levels and technologies out there, but that's really not the point of this video, so I'll just put a link to a decent article in the description below and we can move on, all right?
So what happened?
At the end of last year, Western Digital informed its customers that they needed to upgrade to a new OS, MyCloudOS 5, for security purposes. Okay, so I did. Almost immediately my NAS started acting rather sluggish though, timing out, being slow to access files, and so on. Now, did the one thing lead to the other? I don't know. What I do know is how helpful customer support was when I contacted them in late January. In essence, they had me test one thing after another for almost 4 months in a way that was borderline condescending until they finally concluded, your enclosure is failing. Well, no shit, Sherlock. I had suspected as much from the get-go and had been worried that the now constantly spinning hard drives, kicking off a lot of heat, would deteriorate rapidly. And sure enough, right before this conclusion was reached, one of the 2 drives had failed. So, now it became a race against time to get all the data off the other drive before it all would be lost. This is a good reminder and a perfect example that RAID is not backup, like I said before. The good news is that due to the RAID 1 configuration I had the system in, I was able to retrieve almost all of my data, but because I had to go through a now failing backplane, it took a full 3 weeks to slowly copy all of it onto other drives. And while almost 5 years of NAS usage can certainly end of life the drives within, I had used mine very lightly and regularly checked their smart stats. Something that you should do as well, by the way. But thanks to the drawn-out interaction with customer support, I not only had lost the backplane, but also had rapidly aged the 2 6TB RAID Plus drives inside to the point of failure. When I bought the NAS, I paid $450. Today's equivalent cost about $100 more. So when Western Digital suggested I simply buy a new one from them, and didn't even offer a discount at that time, well, let's say I was less than enthused about the prospect.
Oh, this is frustrating. Okay, so what's the plan?
But, as luck will have it, I was venting my frustration to a tech-savvy friend of mine, hi Kurt, who was not only suggesting I should build my own NAS, but also hooked me up with some old hardware he was planning to get rid of. Score! So, what is my plan? I am going to build a decent 6 to 8 terabyte NAS from existing items I have laying around and add a separate backup solution. I then will add and replace components over time to improve on what I already have. Obviously, you can use whatever fancy hardware you like or have available, and depending on your use case, there's a good chance you're not going to follow in my footsteps. In fact, the guys over at realhardwarereviews.com dedicated the first 17 pages of their homebrew NAS guide to hardware selection, something I basically skipped. I'll put the link in the description as it helped me a great deal. A huge shout out to those folks. I couldn't have done it without their guide. Just be warned, if you follow their instructions to the T, you will be quite inebriated in no time flat. In the next video, we'll talk about my hardware choices, fix some of the issues that came along with those, and discuss how I plan to actually configure the NAS. Thank you for following along so far. If any of this was at all interesting or helpful, please consider leaving a like and comment below. It really does help with the algorithm. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any new content. See you next time, and thank you for watching.
Ow.